I'm actually going to begin with two announcements before we begin our program. And the first one will involve a homework assignment for each of you. NM Bio, for the first time in 5 years, updated our website, and it went live late last night. This weekend, I'll be doing final edits on that. And so if any of you see any mistakes or if any links don't work, I would appreciate you sending me that information. My email is easy. It's greg@nmbio.org. The second item of interest for today is the fact that on the website now is a new report that the Bio Association did, basically on the biosciences for the state of New Mexico as well as nationally. And before we begin this program, I wanted to read to you some of those interesting stats, especially with regards to the state. We now have 6,666 employees in the state at 802 business establishments. That's a 10.4% increase over 2019. So we are gaining traction. Nationally, we still rank 4th and 3rd in most of the categories. But we, as I say, we are showing traction. The state's average pay for someone in the bioscience community is $80,000. That's 42% higher than the private sector in the remaining part of the state. Comparison to national, it's 132,000. And several years ago, and this goes to UNM, when I had talked to Dr. Richard Larson, this was one of the issues for us, and I'm not sure it still is. But what he was telling me was that we were losing a lot of our best and brightest graduates to Arizona and Colorado, where they could basically start off with 20,000 more a year in income, or a little bit better than that. So I don't think we're going to have to address that problem here, but I thought I would put that information out there. NIH funding reached $125 million in 2023, a 30% increase in funding since 2019. Additionally, New Mexico bioscience companies received $261 million in cumulative venture capital investment since 2019, reaching a new annual funding of $72.8 million. So the stats are good, they are improving, but in all honesty with you, when we compare ourselves to Arizona and Colorado and Utah, we're probably about 10 years behind where they are right now. So we certainly need help from the state if we're going to continue to improve. So with that, we'll now begin our program. And Jeff, if you'll talk about yourself and your company.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Jeff Bauer. I am president and CEO of a company called Palladium Biosciences. We're located in Las Cruces as part of the Arrowhead Center, which is associated with New Mexico State University. By way of background, I've been an entrepreneur for about close to 30 years now, and I've started 5 different companies, all doing the exact same thing. So the majority of the companies I've started have been in California. So I'm a native Californian, born and raised there, grew up there, spent most of my working adult life there. And so a lot of the businesses that I founded naturally were born in that state. Additionally, as a point of interest is I also founded a similar business in another country. So I was, for a time, part of the Thailand government's approved consultancy for rapid diagnostic tests. So rapid diagnostic tests, as I view them and as you probably know them, are things like a pregnancy test or a home COVID test. Our companies develop and manufacture those tests. So one of the interesting things I think that Victor brought up in response to a question relating science and technology and entrepreneurship, and how that, he pointed out that there was science and technology on one part of an island, and then on another island was small companies, and that you needed a bridge to connect those two sectors. And so my companies have always been that bridge. So I recognized a long time ago that people with ideas who wanted to become entrepreneurs and spin out companies from universities or what have you, mom and pop who has an idea, needed a pathway to do that. So my company has always been that pathway, that bridge. So we know the science of technology, and yet we know how to run a business. So we enable them to take their idea and turn it into a real product, that can then be manufactured and sold, and turn that into an actual business. So that's what my companies have done, all in the bioscience space, particularly on rapid diagnostic tests.
Paul?
Good afternoon. My name's Paul Lohr, and like Jeff, I've been an entrepreneur for about 30 years in New Mexico, and also started 5 or 6 companies. I've lost track, but at any rate, I was struck by something the keynote speaker said, that it's about solving problems and figuring out what needs to be done. I had a kind of a unique path to where I'm at today. I'm not a scientist, but I'm the founder and president and COO of Mercury Bio, which is located in Santa Fe. We've been working on a drug delivery platform. It actually started out, we were working on a therapeutic for COVID, but then we pivoted because along the way, we had to figure out how to encapsulate these rather delicate molecules in particles that could then reach the cytoplasm of a cell that was infected with the virus and shut it down. And so we came up with a method of using a yeast, which is a very close relative of brewer's yeast. And all cells produce what's called extracellular vesicles. They're about 1/100th of the size of the cell itself. And they actually communicate intercellularly by passing molecules back and forth. So we utilized this particular strain of yeast because it had some very unique characteristics. And there wasn't any literature that we could find on it. So it was a fertile ground for intellectual property. But on the other hand, we had to do a lot of real basic science. And so we've been at it for 4 years now. We actually have a patent that's been awarded on the foundation of the science, and another dozen or so patents that are built on top of that foundation. So it's proving to be very versatile. We actually could, it is a platform technology. We can pack these little particles with RNA, DNA, proteins, and small molecular weight molecules to treat not just viral diseases, but also genetic disorders and cancer. And we've been working with the Comprehensive Health Center here at the University of New Mexico to do mouse studies with our particles, and we've shown that we can inject them, or we can feed the yeast to the mice, and then they reside in the gut and start pumping out these extracellular vesicles, and they cross the blood-gut barrier, they circulate throughout the body, and they access all the major organs in the body, including crossing the blood-brain barrier. So there's a huge potential for curing things like Alzheimer's. I guess it was in the paper today, there's projected a million new Alzheimer's patients in the next 30 years or something like that. But also We've been able to target these vesicles with by populating them with proteins on the surface of the particle, and that makes them stick to certain cell receptors. So, for instance, in the case of COVID, we can target the ACE2 receptor that the spike protein of the virus attaches to. So, the likelihood of that therapeutic getting to that cell is greatly improved. And this is significant because the current technology involves lipid nanoparticles, which don't necessarily have access to all the major organs. They tend to get filtered out in the kidneys and the liver. And so we have a targeting mechanism to get these very delicate molecules to where they need to go, which I think will definitely revolutionize medicine. And we're on our way, but we're still pre-revenue, but we're getting there.
Okay, thank you. Our third speaker, if you'll look at the monitors, is Nicholas.
Thanks. So I'm the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Circular Genomics. We're a New Mexico company that were founded 4 years ago. We actually are the first company to derive biomarkers that are coming from the brain to provide precision medicine in psychiatry and neurology. So specifically, these molecules are called circular RNAs. And the invention was based on work that I did as a professor at UNM. Up until last year, I was a tenured professor at the Department of Neurosciences. So pretty much all these years, we have developments of new drug treatments for psychiatric disorders, but they only work for a small subset of patients. So for example, antidepressants only work 40 or 50% of the time. So that creates significant delays. And of course, given how severe and devastating these disorders are, creates an unacceptable current standard of care. So we are the first company to utilize these brain-derived circular RNA biomarkers to predict response to antidepressant treatment. We actually recently launched our assay. It's called MindLight, and it's a blood assay that is able to predict with 80% accuracy the likelihood to respond to treatment. There is some interplay with a Paul's company as these molecules are escaping the blood-brain barrier using extracellular vesicles. So excited to hear about your company, Paul. So in the latest 4 years, being a company in New Mexico, we were residing in the Biosciences Center. And I'm happy to share any of our experience and especially the potential improvements that we can do with the interface between academia and industry in New Mexico.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with a one-off question, and it's really going to Jeff because he's a little bit unusual. He actually moved his company from San Diego, the center of the bioscience industry, to Las Cruces.
Correct.
Why?
That's a good question. And it's multifaceted. One of them is that we were struggling financially to be running a business and also living personally in San Diego. So after years and years of running a business in Southern California, in the biosciences capital of the U.S. pretty much, we got to a point where it was just no longer economically feasible, both personally and professionally, to be able to, thrive there. Great access to infrastructure, fantastic talent and staffing, great use of cross-border agreements to facilitate lower cost assembly and things. So a lot of advantages to being in San Diego. And so when we were looking at relocating out of San Diego to somewhere more economically feasible for our business, we had several factors that we wanted to look at. One is personally, we want to be able to afford to live. Our company is largely a family company. So my son runs it as well. And so we wanted to be able to have our, to be able to live and work and thrive in an area. So that was one. One was we wanted a facility that would really foster our growth because we were this particular iteration of this business is a fairly new company, and so we're small and we're growing. So we wanted to be able to have a facility that could grow with us. And then third is we wanted to continue to be able to take advantage of cross-border agreements, so that we could be able to manufacture products economically for all markets. And for the US market, we can manufacture ourselves with our own staffing in Las Cruces or from wherever. But if we're manufacturing for LMICs or low and middle income countries or low resource countries, we've got to be able to be competitive largely with Chinese products or Indian products. And so we need to have access to really, really low cost manufacturing. Las Cruces and New Mexico fit that bill perfectly. So we were able to, afford to live and work and thrive. We found a great partner in the Arrowhead Center through New Mexico State University, giving us a fantastic facility with opportunity for growth. And of course, we're able to take advantage through cross-border agreements by having we're just now starting to get that rolling, but having some low-cost assembly done across the border and be able to move product back and forth.
Thank you. Looking out 2 years, what is the biggest obstacle to each of your companies in terms of your growth?
Infrastructure and capital, definitely. Lab space is at a premium, but it's not existent really. But you have we need more infrastructure. We're growing and we're looking for a lab space. I know circular genomics is probably in the same boat in that regard, and then raising capital in New Mexico has been very difficult. Some of our team is at JP Morgan Healthcare in San Francisco right now, meeting with venture groups out of state and from all over the world for that matter. It's sort of the Super Bowl of healthcare. And, we are talking to local and VCs as well. And I know the State Investment Council has been trying to stimulate some action in this activity in this area. And also I serve as the chairman of the board of New Mexico Bioscience Authority, and we're going to try and pass a $25 million co-investment bill to do public-private partnerships in this space. It's particularly difficult for a startup. The further along you are as a company, the more that the economic development programs that exist in the state work for you. But startups really tough, especially biotech, because biotech is very expensive. My average salary for 10 scientists on the payroll is $100,000 a year, and we've been at it for 4 years now. So but the rewards are huge.
Yeah, from my experience, again, of course, capital and raising funds locally, although we have significant investments from New Mexico, both in our seed series and our recently completed Series A, it was definitely very challenging, and it would have helped if the state had provided some additional assistance, for example, matching a percentage of investments from local investors in fundraising. So that would have been a very important assistance. Another difficulty for circular genomics, because we are in this cutting edge scientific field where there's a few experts and leaders, it was recruiting and retaining talent. We were able to get some very talented students from UNM, but then from then on to actually build the proper personnel for both our R&D and our regulatory laboratories, we had to outsource them outside the state. So now we have a CAP-CLIA lab outside of San Diego, for example, which is not surprisingly much more expensive, right? But then finding the proper talent there was easier for us to achieve, especially in a short timeline, right? Every startup has to achieve significant milestones in a very short timeline. So I would say these were the most significant difficulties.
I'd like to ask each of you also in terms of the talent acquisition process and how that's going for you.
I'll start. It's rough, really rough. Being in Las Cruces, I think, makes it even rougher. So we've had real difficulty in finding talent at all positions and levels. So whether it's regulatory or um, you know, immunology, marketing, business, manufacturing labor, we've found it a struggle to find anyone willing to come to Las Cruces. And inherently, there's not a huge pool to draw from in Las Cruces, and even getting manufacturing staff to work and to commit and want to come in every day at a, at the basically the same time, for a more than a week or a month has been difficult. So that's been a real challenge.
We've been very fortunate, I think partly because the reputation of my co-founder, chief science officer, is very well known. He's a world-renowned scientist. And when we post job openings on the internet, just in LinkedIn and so forth, we've had 80 or plus applicants for each position. And we give preference to hiring locally. It's obviously people that are already settled here, but we also try to attract the most talented, brightest people we can in their respective specialties.
Yeah.
Paul, you mentioned basically going for 25 million this year with the state legislature. So far, we're 0 for 3 in the last 3 previous legislatures. Why do you think you might have success this year?
Well, I think the legislature has been very open to it. I think we were very successful last time around, passing it through the House and the Senate. And we had some concerns on the part of the administration that I think we've addressed now, basically about around clawback methods. And unfortunately, I think government is risk adverse, but in the entrepreneur space, I mean, the root of entrepreneur is risk taker. Some companies are going to fail, it's a fact, but the ones that succeed will do well. And I think the important thing is to create an ecosystem here where you do have a talent pool like you have in San Diego or Boston in the biosciences. And so fail fast, fail forward, and start another company. I'd like New Mexico to be known as a startup-friendly state.
Okay. Going, let me throw this one out at you then. With regards to your working with the state in the economic development departments for the state, or if you're talking about the counties, can any of you relate any good experiences where you've been helped? Or on the other hand, if you felt that they fell short in terms of meeting your goals or needs?
I have had a relatively good experience. So we've been able to access some grants and been facilitated by that, grants for building infrastructure, grants for hiring. So it's been largely pretty good. Where they kind of trip up, at least for us, is we have to have a lot of staff on payroll. So we've got to grow and be able to document it via a payroll, which sometimes that works for us and sometimes it doesn't. So some of our staff are temp. They come in for assembly and manufacturing. Some of our staff are remote because we have difficulty hiring technical talent for our industry here. So being able to more broadly recognize, obviously a lot of the grants are designed to promote hiring from within New Mexico, and we understand that. But the revenue comes into New Mexico. A lot of it is spent here in New Mexico on infrastructure and salaries. But I think a mixed bag. So it's been good. We have had access to some grants and got some money where we needed it. And some of the regulatory and compliance hurdles have been difficult to overcome.
So we've also been able to take advantage of a couple of state programs, the New Mexico Small Business Assistance Program, which provides in up to $120,000 in research, raw research that can be conducted at Sandia or Los Alamos National Labs. And then we've also obtained two $150,000 trigger technology readiness grants from the state, and that goes to works the same way. It's just a little more directed, and you have to have a collaborative research agreement with one of the labs to get that to be eligible for a trigger grant, which we do. We have a collaborative research agreement with Los Alamos using their theoretical division, which can model these docking mechanisms that I was describing and targeting mechanisms in their supercomputers and come up with algorithms that they can use machine learning to make them better. So it gives us a great speedy response to, say, an emerging pandemic where we can map the DNA or the RNA, as the case with the SARS-CoV-2 and virus. And so that helps a lot as far as gaining intellectual property, which is kind of our cachet in bioscience. And also the labs themselves are a great resource. And I know I've spoken to many of the economic development people, some of which are here today, like Debbie, and everybody's very eager to help. So I think the intent is here. It just takes a lot of, just determination.
Okay. You mentioned you do have people at the JP Morgan conference this year. How about the Resi conference, which is held at the same time? Were you also sending people over to visit there while they're there?
I'm sure they'll check in. Yeah.
They'll check in. Okay. Reason I asked that was we had the founder of Resi here in Albuquerque just maybe a month, 2 months ago. And they have generated $500 million in the last 10 years for startups. Basically, they are focused on startups. And his advice, as I remember when he was talking to a number of the startups here, was you've got to go outside of New Mexico if you're going to look for the funds that you're going to need to increase. And I'm guessing you're buying into that line at this point.
We are, but we also have some early commitments from local companies if we can bring a lead in to also contribute and be a participant in our Series A round, which is what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the audience if anyone has questions. Everyone looking for another coffee break? Okay. All right. I'll throw one out. Well, you mentioned the issue with the lab space, and I'll actually ask a question to Lisa because I know UNM has been trying to build lab space here potentially at Rainforest, if we could get an update.
Yes, we're very interested in having wet lab space built in the 2-story classroom as a start. We've been working with a developer for a few years now, and challenges with COVID and financing now with interest rates up. And our developer unfortunately had his house burned down in the Palisades just this week. So we've had a few challenges in getting that going, but we're fully committed. And hopefully Stu, I know, would like to expand the Bioscience Center. We're all in favor of that. So something we desperately need. And now on the Bioscience Authority Board, I'm in favor of the Bioscience Authority trying to lead the charge in terms of getting some additional wet lab space.
And if I may comment here, in addition to the excellent bioscience incubator spaces that exist, and they're becoming more prevalent in New Mexico, we will need more bioscience accelerator programs. I know that comes next, but that's something that is missing in comparison with other states where there are strategic partnerships with large pharma or medium-sized pharma, and there are accelerator innovator hubs within the state. So that's more for a mid-stage company that has succeeded early on and is maybe post-revenue or beginning revenue to stay in New Mexico and have the space to grow.
All right, thank you. Stu, your name was mentioned. Can you tell me how? And one of the things that surprised me was earlier when you were speaking, you were saying you're getting a lot more tech companies at your facility as opposed to biotech that might need the wet lab space.
Yeah, that seems to be what's happening is that where when we first started the Bioscience Center in 2013, we were 100% biotech companies. And as time has evolved, we've moved into the point where non-biotech companies are taking the lab space. And I think it's largely because we're just not seeing the number of early stage biotech companies that we did 5 or 10 years ago. The demand for lab space is not only bio, it's pretty broad based. So I think that's part of the issue. But there's no doubt that we need more lab space in New Mexico. One of the issues is if you look at the cost of lab space nationally, it's probably at a low of $75 a square foot, and it goes up to $225 a square foot. And at the Bioscience Center, we charge, I think it's 35. Okay. But that's because we're not for profit.
Right.
We're just trying to break even. And so if a developer tries to build more lab space, there's no profit potential, so they won't do it. Which is why the only way we're going to get more lab space is if it gets sponsored in some way by the state.
So basically, you're saying we would have a very hard time enticing somebody from out of state to come here and build lab space.
Same reason. They
Same.
can't charge enough to make a profit.
To make a
As
profit.
real estate developers.
Okay. Is, in terms of your knowledge of the local industry right now, is there lab space available at UNM or some of the other facilities?
There's a little bit of lab space available from CNM, but it's likely not viable because of their restrictions on use and accessibility for other than 9 to 5. There's maybe a little lab space at UNM, but similar problems. There are restrictions there. I know UNM's addressing that, but hasn't yet done so.
Okay. Paul, you're at the Santa Fe Business Incubator. You've been expanding. You're probably the lead tenant now. Is there much space available there?
There's some, yes, and they do have a shared lab. I think, Stu, you set that up about, what, 14 years ago or something. But at any rate, that's a very good way to support startup companies is to have shared lab space. This equipment's very expensive. And at the Santa Fe Business Incubator, we pay $1,000 a month for access to the shared lab. And then we have our own, several of our own labs in that same building. And as we get, I think this year we're going to be pretty close to bursting at the seams there, though. So I'm actively looking for space. I know they've been fantastic. They also provide great conference rooms, and so you can remote meet and all kinds of support services Jessica. I used to work there, and she was great at marketing companies. So, you know, it's a great place to start. But I see a need for additional space where, you know, right now we're looking for like a 10 to 20,000 square foot facility. And then, you know, there's just not much of that around. I was just up in Los Alamos, where I used to be the lab manager for Pebble Labs, and we had a 26,000 square foot lab that's now housing the bioscience, part of the bioscience division of Los Alamos National Lab. But and to that point, there's I think one of the strengths that we have in New Mexico is the 3 research universities and the 3 national labs, which are doing a lot of raw science that is being funded by the federal government. And there's a great potential for spinning out companies. And also I'll say that I've been very successful in getting a top C-level managers. And these are people that have had experience in bioscience. Maybe they've made they made their business, sold it, and moved to Santa Fe for the lifestyle. And, you know, basically are still interested in keeping, you know, a hand in the field and working on it. So that is an asset that I don't know has been fully appreciated.
There has been talk of, and it's been going on for years and years, of building new lab space at Los Alamos outside of the lab facilities. Does that have any traction in terms of what you know?
Not particularly. I mean, the lab did buy the old Pebble Labs facility, and also the old Viome facility, and now they're occupying that. And these are two startup companies that spun out of the lab. Viome moved to the Seattle area, I believe, and Pebble downsized.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any questions from the audience? Going once, going twice? Sold. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.